Hello, everyone. Carson Courier here. You're taking a live look to Washington, D.C. as the House is getting ready to vote for a fourth time for a new House Speaker. So, as you can see, they are doing a roll call vote right now, just figuring out who's all there. Totals, we should have around 433 people if everyone shows up. What they're trying to do right now is figure out how many people are there so they know the majority that that individual needs to win to become the next House Speaker. So, Republicans, they have their fourth nominee, Mike Johnson. He's a representative from Louisiana. We know that the former House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, he's been saying that he believes that Johnson has enough votes to be elected. Of course, we have to see once we get the totals of how many people are here, as well as those votes counted. But everyone should have been here about 2 minutes ago. You can see there are still 122 people who aren't there, 311 people or 313 that are there. So we will keep watching this throughout the morning, see how many people show up, as well as giving you the latest updates on that vote. We'll let you listen in now.
Are all members recorded? On this roll call, 429 members have recorded their presence. The question now recurs on the election of Speaker. The tellers will please come forward to take their seats once again. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I didn't even notice. All right. The nominations are now in order. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Stefanik.
Mr. Speaker Pro Temp, Madam Clerk, colleagues, on behalf of the House Republican Conference, I rise today to nominate the gentleman from Louisiana, Mike Johnson, as Speaker of the People's House. We convene this esteemed body today at a time of great crisis across America, a time of unprecedented challenges in this hallowed chamber, and a time when our most precious ally, Israel's very existence, is under attack from forces of evil. Yesterday, our dear colleague, our former conference chair, our chair of Energy and Commerce, Cathy McMorris Rodgers, nominated Mike Johnson in our conference. And she put it best, and I want to quote her today. She said, quote, "Trust has been broken and we have come to a standstill. How do we restore trust between members, leadership, and ultimately between Congress and we, the people?" Cathy went on to say, "There's a sense that it cannot be business as usual." She went on to note, above the Speaker's chair in the House chamber is our nation's motto, "In God we trust." Ms. McMorris Rodgers went on to say, "The times in which we are living demand boldness, unity, and transformational leadership that begins with trust in God and each other. Trust is when the magic happens." In the story of King David, we are reminded that man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart, end quote. Today is the day that House Republicans will humbly look in our hearts and elect Mike Johnson as Speaker of the People's House. A man of deep faith, Mike epitomizes what it means to be a servant leader. A deeply respected constitutional lawyer, Mike has dedicated his life to preserving America's great principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mike is a titan on the Judiciary Committee and a dedicated member of the House Armed Services Committee. And as vice chair of our conference, he has united all of our members to speak clearly and boldly on behalf of the American people. A friend to all and an enemy to none, Mike is strong, tough, and fair, and above all, Mike is kind. And at this very moment, this Republican conference knows that we live in perilous times and the American people are hurting. Families are struggling under the pain of inflation caused by reckless far-left spending, unable to afford groceries, heat, or gas. We have an inhumane open border with millions illegally smuggled and trafficked, and tens of thousands of children lost in the chasm of the incompetence and negligence of the Biden administration. Israel is under attack by Iranian-backed Hamas terrorists committing atrocities, with Israelis suffering the bloodiest days in modern memory. Crime is skyrocketing on our streets, while there are vicious calls from the left to defund our great men and women in blue. American energy production has been crushed by Joe Biden's radical, failed, far-left Democrat policies, causing seniors, farmers, and families to pay more at the pump. And Americans fundamentally understand that the federal government has been illegally weaponized against we, the people, shredding the Constitution, targeting conservatives, parents, yes, I'll say it again. The federal government has been illegally weaponized against we, the people, shredding the Constitution, targeting conservatives, parents, and even Joe Biden's top political opponent. The people are looking to this great chamber to save America, and save America we will. And as we embark on the path ahead, I am reminded of Galatians 6:9. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. House Republicans and Speaker Mike Johnson will never give up. Today is the day we get this done. May God bless our next Speaker, Mike Johnson. May God bless the United States of America. And I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker pro tempore. I notice a little bit more of a smile on your face today than we have in the past. Mr. Speaker, I rise today at the direction of the Democratic Caucus to place into nomination for the position of Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries from New York. Mr. Speaker, you may agree with this, but we are back here 22 days into this Republican-manufactured chaos, and House Republicans have brought us to the exact same position that we were back then. All of the infighting, all of the disarray, just to end up where we were 3 weeks ago. These past few weeks, we have been left wondering if Republicans were truly intent on solving our issues, reopening the House of Representatives, and rallying around someone to lead this chamber. Or has this been about something else? Has this been about a focus of House Republicans to find the person who can pass their extreme litmus test to oppose marriage equality, enact a nationwide abortion ban without exceptions, gut Social Security and Medicare, and support overturning a free and fair election? It's a fair question. It's a fair question. No one. Nowhere in that candidate questionnaire is it about growing the middle class, helping our communities, keeping the cost of health care lower, and making life for everyday Americans better. The gentlewoman from New York said it right. This has been about one thing. This has been about who can appease Donald Trump. House Republicans have put their names behind someone who has been called the most important architect of the Electoral College objections. He's spearheaded, that's fair, we know how you feel. Yeah, you've made that clear. He's spearheaded the legal effort, joined by more than 100 of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, in support of a dangerous and baseless lawsuit to overturn the results of the 2020 election. On the eve of January 6th, some of my Republican colleagues even called this a failed strategy. Yet those same individuals plan to stand right next to him today. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, House Democrats believe that when members of this body voted to reject the results of the 2020 election, they forfeited their ability to lead this chamber. On this side of the aisle, we know what leadership looks like. Hakeem Jeffries has never turned his back on the will of the American people. The son of two social workers, he has always stood by the side of working families. The most pressing needs of everyday Americans are his North Star. He believes that everyone in America should have the opportunity to get ahead and achieve their version of the American dream. He believes that access to affordable health care is a right, not a privilege. He believes that reproductive freedom must be guaranteed, not stripped away. He believes that working families, not the wealthy and the well-connected, should be rewarded. He believes in growing the middle class so that everyone can succeed. He believes that our schools and our communities should be safe and free from gun violence. He believes that investing in public schools, not depriving students of fact-based education by banning books. He believes in taking care of our seniors and our veterans, not slashing their benefits. He believes in living up to the promise that America is a beacon of hope and a land of opportunity. He believes in defending democracy against all enemies and adversaries, foreign and domestic. He believes in standing by our allies, Israel and Ukraine. and he believes in keeping our government running and open. Let me be clear. This is not just a belief system. Leader Jeffries has the track record to back it up. He is certainly a far contrast from who Republicans have nominated, with or without their votes, to nominate today. But if House Republicans choose, they can still join us on a bipartisan path forward. Let's come together to fund our government, support our allies abroad, and deliver for working families. End the chaos, end the dysfunction, end the extremism. Let's open up the people's house. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The reading clerk will now call the roll.
Adams. Jeffries. Adderholt. Johnson. Aguilar. Jeffries. Alford.
Servant Leader, Honorable Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Allen.
Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Allred. Jeffries. Amadei.
Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Armstrong. Johnson. Arrington. Johnson. Auchincloss. Jeffries. Babin. Johnson. Bacon. Johnson. Baird. Johnson. Balderson. Johnson. Ballant. Jeffries. Banks. Johnson. Barr. Johnson. Berrigan. Jeffries. Bean of Florida. Johnson. Beatty. Jeffries. Bentz. Johnson. Barra. Jeffries. Bergman. Johnson. Beyer. Beyer. Bice. Johnson. Biggs. Johnson. Bilirakis.
Absolutely, Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Bishop of Georgia. Jeffries. Bishop of North Carolina. Johnson. Blumenauer. Jeffries. Blunt Rochester. Jeffries. Boebert. Johnson. Bonamici. Jeffries. Bost. Johnson. Bowman. Jeffries. Boyle of Pennsylvania. Boyle of Pennsylvania. Burkeen. Johnson. Brown. Jeffries. Brownlee. Jeffries. Buchanan.
Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Buck. Johnson. Bouchon. Johnson. Bazinski. Jeffries. Burchett. Johnson. Burgess. Johnson. Burleson. Johnson. Bush. Jeffries. Calvert. Johnson. Kamek. Johnson. Caraveo. Jeffries. Carbajal. Jeffries. Cardenas. Jeffries. Carey. Johnson. Carl. Johnson. Carson. Jeffries. Carter of Georgia.
Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Carter of Louisiana. Jeffries. Carter of Texas. Johnson. Cartwright. Jeffries. Kassar. Jeffries. Case. Jeffries. Caston. Jeffries. Castor of Florida. Jeffries. Castro of Texas. Jeffries. Chavez de Reamer. Johnson. Sherfilis McCormick. Jeffries. Chu. Jeffries. Ciscomani. Johnson. Clark of Massachusetts. Jeffries. Clark of New York. Jeffries. Cleaver. Jeffries. Klein. Johnson. Cloud. Johnson. Clyburn. Jeffries. Clyde. Johnson. Cohen. Jeffries. Cole. Johnson. Collins. Johnson. Comer. Johnson. Connolly. Jeffries. Correa. Correa. Costa. Jeffries. Courtney. Jeffries. Craig.
Happy wedding anniversary to my wife, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Crane. Johnson. Crawford. Johnson. Crenshaw. Johnson. Crockett. Jeffries. Crow. Jeffries. Cuellar. Jeffries. Curtis. Johnson. Davids of Kansas. Jeffries. Davidson. Johnson. Davis of Illinois. Jeffries. Davis of North Carolina. Jeffries. Dean of Pennsylvania. Jeffries. DeGette. Jeffries. Dela Cruz. Johnson. DeLauro. Jeffries. Del Bene. Jeffries. DeLuzio. Jeffries. DeSaulnier. Jeffries. Desjardins. Johnson. Diaz-Pizito. Johnson. Diaz-Balart. Johnson. Dingell. Jeffries. Doggett. Jeffries. Donalds. Johnson. Duarte. Johnson. Duncan. Johnson. Dunn of Florida.
Johnson.
Johnson. Edwards. Johnson. Elsie. Johnson. Emmer. Johnson. Escobar. Jeffries. Eshoo. Jeffries. Espaillat. Jeffries. Estes. Johnson. Evans. Jeffries. Ezell. Johnson. Fallon.
Fourth District of Texas proudly and enthusiastically vote for Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Finstra. Johnson. Ferguson. Johnson. Finstad. Johnson. Fischbach. Johnson. Fitzgerald. Johnson. Fitzpatrick. Johnson. Fleischman.
Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Fletcher. Jeffries. Flood. Johnson. Foster. Jeffries. Fushi. Jeffries. Fox. Johnson. Lois Frankel. Jeffries. Scott Franklin. Johnson. Frost. Jeffries. Fry. Johnson. Fulcher. Johnson. Gates. Johnson. Gallagher. Johnson. Gallego. Gallego. Garamendi. Jeffries. Garbarino. Johnson. Mike Garcia. Johnson. Robert Garcia. Jeffries. Garcia of Illinois. Jeffries. Garcia of Texas. Jeffries. Jimenez. Johnson. Golden of Maine. Jeffries. Goldman of New York. Jeffries. Gomez. Jeffries. Tony Gonzalez. Johnson. Vicente Gonzalez. Vicente Gonzalez. Good of Virginia. Johnson. Gooden of Texas. Johnson. Gosar. Johnson. Gottheimer. Jeffries. Granger. Johnson. Graves of Louisiana. Johnson. Graves of Missouri. Johnson. Green of Tennessee. Johnson. Green of Texas. Jeffries. Green of Georgia. Johnson. Griffith. Johnson. Grijalva. Jeffries. Grothman. Johnson. Guest. Johnson. Guthrie. Johnson. Hageman. Johnson. Harder of California. Jeffries. Harris. Johnson. Harshbarger. Johnson. Hayes. Jeffries. Hearn. Johnson. Higgins of Louisiana. Johnson. Higgins of New York. Jeffries. Hill. Johnson. Himes. Jeffries. Henson. Johnson. Horsford. Jeffries. Houchin. Johnson. Houlihan. Jeffries. Hoyer. Jeffries. Hoyle of Oregon. Jeffries. Hudson. Johnson. Huffman. Jeffries. Huizinga. Johnson. Hunt. Johnson. Isa. Johnson. Ivy. Jeffries. Jackson of Illinois. Jeffries. Jackson of North Carolina. Jeffries. Jackson of Texas. Johnson. Jackson Lee.
The distinguished gentleman, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Jacobs. Jeffries. James. Johnson. Jayapal. Jeffries. 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 Johnson of Georgia.
Standing for reproductive freedom for women, I cast my vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Johnson of Louisiana. Johnson. Johnson of Ohio. Johnson. Johnson of South Dakota. Johnson. Jordan. Johnson. Joyce of Ohio. Joyce of Ohio. Johnson. Joyce of Pennsylvania. Johnson. Kamlager Dove. Jeffries. Captor. Jeffries. Kane of New Jersey. Johnson. Keating. Jeffries. Kelly of Illinois. Jeffries. Kelly of Mississippi. Johnson. Kelly of Pennsylvania. Johnson. Khanna. Jeffries. Kiggins of Virginia. Johnson. Kildee. Jeffries. Kiley. Johnson. Kilmer. Jeffries. Kim of California. Johnson. Kim of New Jersey. Jeffries. Krishnamurthy. Jeffries. Custer. Jeffries. Kustoff. Johnson. LaHood. Johnson. LaLota. Johnson. LaMalfa. Johnson. Lamborn. Johnson. Landsman. Landsman. Jeffries. Langworthy. Johnson. Larson of Washington. Jeffries. Larson of Connecticut. Jeffries. Latta. Johnson. LaTurner. Johnson. Lawler. Johnson. Lee of California. Jeffries. Lee of Florida. Johnson. Lee of Nevada. Jeffries. Lee of Pennsylvania. Jeffries. Ledger Fernandez. Jeffries. Lesko. Johnson. Letlow. Johnson. Levin. Jeffries. Liu. Jeffries. Lofgren. Jeffries. Loudermilk.
Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Lucas. Johnson. Luke Kameyer. Johnson. Luna. Johnson. Luttrell. Johnson. Lynch. Jeffries. Mace. Johnson.
Well, starting off today with a
Magaziner.
look out at the House Speaker vote happening right now. It just got started about 20 minutes ago. Of course, the hope is now
Johnson.
that the fourth candidate will be the final
Mann.
candidate for House Republicans. They are a little ways into that vote, but 431 members
Johnson.
do need to cast their votes today. So this is something we're going to keep an eye on and bring you, of course, the latest in all of the turbulence that's happened in the last 24 hours there, bringing them up to this point and everything that's kind of happened over the last 3 weeks. So
Lots of chaos.
Yeah, all the chaos hopefully coming to an end today. Thanks for joining us for this 13 Plus Fastcast. I'm Anna Orsini.
And I'm Carson Courier. We hope your day's off to a great start so far. We do want to get started with some new details on a breaking news story here at home.
Now, this story is something that we've been following since last night, learning more about the man who was arrested and the investigation into this individual after threatening a mass shooting at the U of A. So something that's obviously very scary, going to the U of A and
absolutely.
just being in college. And thankfully, that ended up not being the case.
That is right. 27-year-old Michael Lee, that is who you are actually looking at right here on your screen, hopefully. And according to police, he has no affiliation with the U of A. The university was notified on Sunday after Lee allegedly made a threat toward Greek life in a group chat. Now, authorities began monitoring Lee, and he was arrested the next day during a traffic stop. Right now, he is charged with making a terroristic threat. But since the FBI assisted in the investigation, he may also face federal charges.
McGarvey.
And just in this morning, we
Jeffries.
now know some of the things that Lee was saying
McGovern.
or allegedly saying on social
Jeffries.
media. So we just want to walk you through some
McHenry.
of his statements
Johnson.
from his social media posts, according to police. And according to the interim complaint, Lee posted a message to social media saying, quote, "There's going to be a mess and
Meeks.
He said, "Sure is." The documents also show in a social
Jeffries.
media post that Lee said,
Menendez.
"It's a solo mission. I'm not normal.
Jeffries.
I never have been." In
Ming.
another post, the interim complaint shows that Lee stated, quote,
Jeffries.
"I'm going to do it, guys. My mind is made
Muser.
up, and there's nothing you can do or say
Johnson.
to stop me." According to the
Mfume.
document, Lee planned to carry out the mass shooting
Jeffries.
with an AR-15, and as Carson said,
Miller
was taken
of
into
Illinois.
custody following a traffic stop for speeding.
Johnson.
According to the interim complaint, after
Miller of
officers read
Ohio.
him his rights, documents showed that he then admitted
Johnson.
to being the author of these social media messages. You're
Miller
seeing on
of
your
West
screen.
Virginia.
Of course, this is a story we're going to continue
Johnson.
to monitor very closely throughout the day. We have a
Miller
reporter on
Meeks.
this, trying to get the latest from students and just everyone
Johnson.
on campus, knowing that something that could have been
Mills.
very, very tragic was stopped, and also following up with police and just learning more
Johnson.
about this investigation. But you can read the full story
Molinaro.
on our website, KLD.
Johnson. Molinar.
And continuing to
Johnson.
rolling out new graphics.
Mooney.
Perfect. Well, continuing to keep an eye on that House
Johnson.
Speaker vote, lots, like we said at the beginning.
Moore
lots
of
chaos
Alabama.
leading up to this point.
Johnson.
We do know that they're voting right now. Hopefully
Moore of Utah.
choosing the next House Speaker.
Absolutely.
Johnson.
We want to actually show you a live
Moore of
look to
Wisconsin.
all of the action there in Washington, D.C.
Jeffries.
Now, we know House Republicans once
Moran.
again trying to elect a speaker.
Johnson.
Fourth nominee, Louisiana
Morelli.
Representative Mike Johnson. The third pick,
Jeffries.
Tom Emmer, dropped out the same day
Moskowitz.
he was nominated just 4 hours later
Jeffries.
when it became clear he
Moulton.
didn't have the votes. Now,
Jeffries.
Johnson's goal, like the 3 others before him,
Mervan.
was a majority of votes from lawmakers on the House
Jeffries.
floor. With 2 absences
Mullen.
and 2 vacancies, he can only afford to lose 4
Jeffries.
Republican votes. That means he will need
Murphy.
216 to secure the speakership.
Johnson.
Let's go ahead and we want to listen in.
Nadler. Jeffries. Napolitano. Jeffries. Neal. Jeffries. Neguse. Jeffries. Nels. Johnson. Newhouse. Johnson. Nickel. Jeffries. Norcross.
So again, obviously something that we will continue
Jeffries.
to keep an eye on, throughout this past
Norman.
latest once we know some of those updated numbers. But
Johnson.
what we've been monitoring,
None of Iowa.
no votes
Miracle Mike.
already assigned
Johnson.
and Mike Johnson. So looks like some progress can be made today. Of course, that is the hope.
Obernolte.
And something else that we are following heading
Johnson.
into today is a
Ocasio-Cortez.
hurricane actually made landfall in Mexico overnight.
Jeffries.
Now, we do know that
Ogles.
this started as a tropical storm and then quickly, within 12 hours, was
Johnson.
upgraded to a Category 5
Omar.
hurricane. So a pretty significant storm there in Mexico.
Jeffries.
Right now, people who are impacted.
Owens.
A lot of communication coming in from that region.
Johnson.
Landslides also affecting the highways there.
Pallone.
So they don't have any information so far on
Jeffries.
potential death totals or
Palmer.
injuries, but you can see some
Johnson.
law enforcement there going across the beach telling people
Panetta.
to get out as the storm progressed very quickly
Jeffries.
yesterday. So we do want to bring
Pappas.
meteorologist Mallory Schnell with us today because
Jeffries.
this was kind of something that we didn't even talk about at
Pasquale.
hurricane yesterday at all. And then all of a sudden you're seeing a Category 5 storm make landfall in Mexico.
Historic, right?
Oh yeah, this is like
Jeffries.
the worst case scenario setup, and unfortunately none
Payne.
of the model data really pointed in this direction. Really, the strongest it could have been a Cat 1.
Jeffries.
And for some reason, this particular storm
Pelosi.
actually intensified 80 miles per hour in the course of 12 hours. So definitely.
Jeffries. Peltola. Jeffries.
So it made
Pence.
landfall overnight once again as a Category
Johnson.
5 hurricane.
Perez.
165 mile per hour winds. And
Jeffries.
those winds are sustained at 80
Perry.
miles per hour. So it's still considered
Johnson.
a hurricane, but it is fairly
Peters.
and the good news is
Jeffries.
it's going to continue to
Pedersen.
weaken as it spends more time overnight.
Jeffries.
You can see it continuing just to kind of fizzle out over
Pfluger.
the next 12 to 24 hours.
Johnson.
As it spends more time over mainland
Phillips.
Mexico. So now it's just going to be the cleanup
Jeffries.
efforts, as we head throughout the rest of
Pingree.
the day to see what the damage is left over. But back here at home,
Jeffries.
we're not going to see any impacts from that particular
Pocan.
storm. Lots of sun, quiet
Jeffries.
conditions after yesterday's much-needed
Porter.
rainfall across southern Arizona. We had those
Jeffries.
scattered showers and thunderstorms. Some areas
Posey.
picked up to an inch and a half of rainfall. You can see much drier out there
Johnson.
this morning. Lots of sunshine.
Presley.
And once again, hardly a cloud in sight. And those temperatures
Jeffries.
are pretty comfortable as well. We are seeing
Quigley.
temperatures early this morning. They were in the 40s and 50s.
Jeffries.
Now we're starting to warm up. We're up to 67.
Ramirez.
in Tucson. Just a gorgeous fall morning out there.
Jeffries.
And this nice weather set to continue.
Raskin.
79 your high today. We'll tack on a
Jeffries.
few degrees tomorrow, a few more on Friday.
Reschenthaler.
You know it's a good 7-day forecast.
Johnson.
7 is the warmest temperature we have on there.
Rogers
We'll
of
continue to
Washington.
cool off early next week, just in time for Halloween, with highs in the 70s. Some
Johnson.
gusty winds. And take a look at Monday night into Tuesday morning.
Rogers of
49
Alabama.
degrees through overnight low in Tucson. So
Johnson.
wanting this fall-like weather, and it's finally here.
49 is chilly.
Rogers of
overnight, though, so
Kentucky.
thinking about Halloween night, kids.
Johnson.
Maybe, time to think about incorporating a jacket
Rose.
into your
Right,
costume.
maybe the layer underneath. That's what I used to do as a kid.
Johnson.
In Kentucky. Yeah, I know.
It ruined the
You're
whole
like,
thing.
I'm a
Rosendale.
princess, and then you need like
We
a
don't,
jacket.
yeah.
Johnson.
We don't wear long
Ross.
sleeves.
Right.
Yeah, the princess dress with like
Jeffries.
the Adidas hoodie over
Right.
it.
Rouser.
Yeah,
The sweatpants.
I'm a sporty princess.
Johnson.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Mallory.
Roy.
Mallory, some great information there.
And we do
Johnson.
want to take a look now, once again, just
Ruiz.
keeping an eye on the House Speaker vote. Here's the numbers so far. So
Jeffries.
174
Ruppersberger.
people have voted for Johnson, 154 for Jeffries.
Jeffries.
Big change from what we've seen over the last few weeks.
Rutherford.
There's nobody who's voted for other, nobody that's voted as president.
Johnson.
Again, Mike Johnson
Ryan.
can only lose 4 Republican votes
Jeffries.
today. So far, he's
Salazar.
Yeah, no, some big news here. So obviously we know
Johnson.
this is the 4th vote. So first we had
Salinas.
just lots of chaos. A lot
Jeffries.
of people voting for other people besides the 2
Sanchez.
main nominees here. So some good news, as Amy
Jeffries.
was just saying. An update there.
Santos.
So 178 people so far voted
Johnson.
for Johnson, 157 for
Sarbanes.
Jeffries. Now they need 216 votes to be elected. I
Jeffries.
think a lot of people here in Washington D.C. We're seeing these individuals speaking out after these votes. We're seeing these individuals kind of talking to different media
Scalise.
outlets, saying they are ready to get this over with. I think everyone.
Johnson.
At this time, a government
Scanlon.
shutdown is looming. That could possibly happen on November
Jeffries.
17th, as well as
Schakowsky.
money to Israel, money to Ukraine. Nothing
Jeffries.
can be passed right now. Everything's at a stalemate. So
Schiff.
hopefully we can get some good news here out
Jeffries.
of Washington, D.C. pretty soon.
Snyder.
That's definitely the hope heading into today, and everything that
Jeffries.
we've seen so far indicates that we could be heading in that
Skolton.
direction, and hopefully that's the case. So we're going to let you
Jeffries.
guys listen back in on this vote.
Schreier.
And we'll
Jeffries.
come back in with the updated numbers and let you know
Schweikert.
kind of what ends up being the result.
Johnson. Austin Scott. Johnson. David Scott. Jeffries. Scott of Virginia. Jeffries. Self. Johnson. Sessions. Johnson. Sewell. Jeffries. Sherman. Jeffries. Sherrill. Jeffries. Simpson. Johnson. Slotkin. Jeffries. Smith of Missouri. Johnson. Smith of Nebraska. Johnson. Smith of New Jersey. Johnson. Smith of Washington. Jeffries. Smucker. Johnson. Sorensen. Jeffries. Soto. Jeffries. Spanberger. Jeffries. Sparts. Johnson. Stensbury. Jeffries. Stanton. Jeffries. Stauber. Johnson. Steele. Johnson. Stefanik. Johnson. Style. Johnson. Stubbe. Johnson. Stevens. Jeffries. Strickland.
For the protection of voting rights, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Strong. Johnson. Swalwell. Jeffries. Sykes. Jeffries. Takano. Jeffries. Tenney. Johnson. Tanadar. Jeffries. Thompson of California. Jeffries. Thompson of Mississippi. Jeffries. Thompson of Pennsylvania. Johnson. Tiffany. Johnson. Timmons. Johnson. Titus. Jeffries. Tlaib. Jeffries. Takuda. Jeffries. Tonko. Jeffries. Torres of California. Jeffries. Torres of New York. Jeffries. Trahan. Jeffries. Trone. Jeffries. Turner. Johnson. Underwood. Jeffries. Valadeo. Johnson. Van Drew.
We are back better than ever. Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Van Dyne. Johnson. Van Orden. Van Orden. Vargas. Jeffries. Vasquez. Jeffries. Vesey. Jeffries. Velasquez. Jeffries. Wagner. Johnson. Wahlberg. Johnson. Waltz. Johnson. Wasserman Schultz. Jeffries. Waters.
He supports freedom of choice. Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Watson Coleman.
As the only candidate who represents the integrity of this House,
Watson Coleman.
again, do I need to say Hakeem Jeffries again because I read
Jeffries.
The House will come to order. The clerk, the staff, and the tellers deserve to have the attention of the House. The clerk will continue.
Weber of Texas. Johnson. Webster of Florida. Johnson. Winstrup. Johnson. Westerman. Johnson. Wexton. Jeffries. Wild. Jeffries. Williams of Georgia.
Fulton County, Georgia, votes for Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Williams of New York. Johnson. Williams of Texas.
Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Wilson of Florida. Wilson of Florida. Jeffries. Wilson of South Carolina. Johnson. Whitman. Johnson. Womack.
With the 217th pick in the race for Speaker in the 3rd District of Arkansas, selects Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Yacom. Johnson. Zinke.
The next Speaker of the People's House, Mike Johnson.
Johnson.
The clerk will now call the names of the members who did not answer the first call of the roll.
Byer. Jeffries. Boyle of Pennsylvania. Boyle of Pennsylvania. Correa. Correa. Gallego. Jeffries. Vicente Gonzalez. Vicente Gonzalez. Van Orden. Van Orden.
If there are any members who did not answer the call of the roll, they may come to the well and vote at this time. In their tallies that the total number of votes cast is 429, of which the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana has received 220 votes. And the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 209 votes. Therefore, the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana, having received a majority of the votes cast, is duly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives for the 118th Congress.
Who voted for anyone else, and that was kind of what we were seeing in these past votes. The first vote, we had, I believe, 9 individuals who were voting for other people, and like Anna said, we had to have 4 different individuals, or 3 of them didn't get enough
The
votes.
chair appoints the following committee to escort the Speaker-elect to the chair. The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise. The gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Emmer. The gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Stefanik. The gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Hudson. The gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer. The gentlewoman from Michigan, Mrs. McClain. The gentleman from California, Mr. McCarthy. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Hearn. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Bergman. The gentlewoman from Washington, Mrs. Rogers. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Arrington. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Molinaro. The gentlewoman from Florida, Mrs. Comack. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Jeffries. The gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Clark.